Hey there, and welcome to the Consultants Counsel podcast. I'm Kelsey Creveling, and I am thrilled for today's guest, Dr. Moon Lee. Moon is a dentist and also a dear friend of mine. He and I had the opportunity to work together in 2018, 2019 while working in Chicago with a large healthcare system, helping them through a big implementation project, and we became fast friends, got to enjoy the city together, but also really got to navigate quite a lot from a consulting perspective together. So he's somebody who did not start off going to dental school and coming into consulting, but rather did the opposite. He actually worked within technology, moved into consulting, and then elected to make a later in career transition and go to dental school. So super thrilled to talk with him today to dig into some of the traits and lessons learned from his consulting experience that are now serving him well as a dentist working with patients. Welcome to the Consultants Counsel podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. Joining me is a dear friend and former colleague, Dr. Moon Lee. Now, Moon has not always been a doctor. That's a recent development since he and I had the privilege of working together. So Moon, so thrilled for you to join today. And really get to dig in and share your consulting story and journey, but also your experience working in healthcare, both as a consultant and now as a provider. Welcome.
Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. So, as we dig in, you've had a long track record of being a consultant. What took you into that field?
So I started my career just out of college with a math degree working at a place called Epic Systems, a place you and I both worked at. We didn't know each other there. I think you had already left by the time I started. Might have had like a couple month overlap. Yeah. And Epic was a great place, a great first job. It taught me a lot of great skills, a lot of soft skills on top of technical skills. But when I first started there, it was sort of at the precipice of the transition of my role there. My role was called technical services, so it was supposed to be sort of half technical problem solving, half customer service. But by the time I started, it was becoming almost exclusively customer service. And I went in thinking that it would be a lot more technical problem solving issue. And there's definitely problem solving. But what really essentially kicked my ass was the soft skills. I decided to leave the company after about 3.5 years. And then I was looking for other opportunities. I wasn't planning on staying in the Epic world, essentially. But then about a year after I left, I got offered a consulting gig working with Northwestern. And that's how I got my first consulting job. It was a big learning experience for me. Definitely different coming from sort of the vendor side to working on the client side. And again, I thought I knew everything going into Epic, and that wasn't the case. And I thought I knew everything going into consulting, and that definitely wasn't the case. There was a lot of skills that I didn't quite have working at Epic that I needed to catch up on very quickly as a consultant. And not just, travel hacks or how to make the most of your time in hotels, but just sort of, I think this is where the soft skills come in again, how to work with your clients, how to work with Epic, the vendor, and navigating the politics of all of that as well. I think that was a big thing. So yeah, I essentially kind of fell into consulting like a lot of ex-Epic people do, and now here I am.
Okay, so kind of being pulled into consulting, not being what you were anticipating being a part of. I have to think, even as a math major, you didn't know that you would even maybe be in healthcare, be doing what you were doing. What did you do to get up to speed quickly to be able to deliver value and effectively support your clients?
I would love to say that I read all these books and did research to gain those skills, but what really helped me was great mentorship from other consultants as well as consulting mentors and bosses that I had, including you, Kelsey. So I think at that first job, I worked with my direct supervisor, Christopher, who was also a consultant, and he kind of really helped me build the skills in that I was lacking in consulting. So things like being able to present things effectively, being able to sort of, rather than kind of waiting for the problems to come in and fixing those piecemeal, sort of taking a wider view and taking issues on proactively, and at the same time not only identifying those issues, but having the solutions ready for your clients before you even take it to them.
How have you seen that approach really make a difference?
I think the dynamic is different. I think as a consultant, sometimes you have to essentially protect your job. I don't know if that's the right word to do it. The reason why clients engage us is to solve their issues for them, not just identify issues for them. And versus on the vendor side, I really could just kind of sit there and twiddle my thumbs until something came in. And I think that kind of gave me a much more view from the 30,000 foot, I think is what people say, right? Versus, kind of getting lost in the individual problems that might pop up client to client. So I think that really helped me kind of take a step back and learn the big picture rather than the little fires that putting out here and there.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought that up, because it's really interesting the focus shift that people have to go through when they go from working in industry or working for a vendor to now being a consultant. Because as a consultant, we have to prove our worth every hour of every day that we're working in billing, and we have to continuously show that value. And that is a very different perspective than when you're working with the vendor. And being able to put that mindset in place is a really difficult thing for people who've worked in industry to do, because you're now having to forecast, you're having to put yourself in the client's shoes, you're having to assess and evaluate from a lot of different vantage and viewpoints, and quickly surmise what outcomes might result based on different inputs that you're witnessing and seeing and forecasting. And so that ability is not something that a lot of people do well, but it's something that if you can make that shift, makes all the difference in the really great consultants and those that unfortunately just are not able to make that pivot and end up staying in more analyst type of positions where they're not really being that client facing. They might be on the back end doing due diligence type work, doing analytics work, but they're not actually liaising with the clients and able to be the face of the engagement or the project. So I think that's a huge component that you touched on there, with people's ability to really self-evaluate and reflect on, how am I behaving and how do I need to behave, and what changes do I need to make in order to be able to effectively render that value. What for you made it clear that you actually had to make a shift when you were working working in industry at Epic versus being consulting? Was there anything that happened, inspired for you, that really made that apparent?
Kind of going through my mindset through the ages. When I first graduated college, I had the perspective that all I needed to be was the smart guy or the guy that just solved the problems and not necessarily I didn't really care about soft skills coming out of school. And then in Epic, I that wasn't the case, but I could still kind of hide behind a firm essentially. Um, I didn't have to. I could build confidence by just bearing my head down and doing the job and delivering results, which is great. But as a consultant, there's a big shift where there's a component of selling yourself where you have to lead with confidence, where you have to project confidence from the first sentence you speak to your potential clients, and sort of maintaining that confidence level and competency on top of that. It is very very difficult and very very it takes a lot of work, I guess. Whereas on the vendor side, I think there's always somebody else to kick it up to. Whereas on the consulting side, a lot of the times the buck stops with you. You might still have manager as a consultant, but your work is your work, and how you present yourself is reflective of you mostly, rather than the company mostly.
Yep. No, you summarized that nicely. It is critical. And it's something that I would love for more people as they're entering consulting and even as they're considering consulting to really think about and prepare for.
Yeah.
How am I going to really now present myself in a manner which conveys that confidence, not arrogance, but confidence necessary to gain my clients' trust?
And I think trust is the key word there, because no matter how good of a product you deliver, if they don't have buy-in in your skills and your confidence, it's just not going to be effective. Because a lot of our work is, yes, oh, this number's off, let's fix it here. This number's off, fix it here. But a lot of it is just kind of working through the uh, the interpersonal and working through the politics to implement those solutions. Not that those solutions are good or bad.
Right.
It's the implementation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The execution for sure. Speaking of project execution and doing it well, favorite project outcome? Do you have one?
Well, okay. I was working with a hospital system here in Wisconsin, actually, in South Wisconsin. They've been Epic customers for a long time, but they've been very behind in the upkeep of Epic. I think there were multiple versions behind in terms of Epic software, whereas Epic is pretty adamant that its customers be on the latest and the greatest, right?
Constant.
Yeah, constant updates. That was the first time I wasn't in a big team. It was just me and going in and sort of being the consultant. And I essentially worked on the entire revenue cycle side of it. And that was an opportunity for me to sort of prove myself in terms of in other spots, I had other folks in other projects, I had other consultants and mentors and managers that I worked together to, run through ideas, discuss things, and really drill down on problems together to solve the issue. But at this one, I didn't necessarily have that with other consultants. It was me, and I was bringing expertise that this organization didn't necessarily have. So I couldn't necessarily, rather, I didn't have other folks with the same expertise to talk through things and brainstorm and things like that. And the project was a success. It was sort of an upgrade on top of extending its system to a new hospital they were building, a giant hospital. And yeah, things went amazingly. And checking in with the steering committee, at the organization afterwards, sort of project debrief, they really appreciated the knowledge that I brought and sort of and the work that I did with the teams and as well as training the teams on the latest and the greatest in Epic, which at that point I hadn't worked for Epic probably for 5 years, which means I had to get all these things by sort of digging through the system and reading through the documentation that Epic puts out, which doesn't always have great details. So yeah, it kind of confirmed for me that I still had the technical skills to dig through things and train folks on how to support the system, but it also confirmed that I could First thing is, I think sometimes for me personally, I had a habit as a consultant of being very positivity focused in that I felt bad delivering bad news. I would say X is a problem, but I kind of try to soften the blow and sugarcoat things. That cannot be the case in healthcare. If I tell you you have cancer, but then I say it's not that bad, your trust in me is going to be very not great. So sort of being able to have awkward conversations and tough conversations is a skill that I'm still actively working on. A lot of the times with health, it's more about not necessarily the best medical outcome, but outcome for that person as a human being. And it's really understanding that and keeping that in mind as I work with patients. That's also a big goal that I'm working on.
Neat.
Yeah.
How do you make sure you don't bring the work home, or what do you do to insulate yourself from inevitably some of that difficulty that you experience every day?
Yeah. It's really difficult not to bring the work home, especially because sometimes you get after hours calls and you're talking to patients on your cell phone while minutes ago you were watching TV or doing laundry or something. As a dentist, it's been a lot easier. Whereas a consultant, anytime I had my computer, I could be working. But as a dentist, much more difficult to do that. So definitely having sort of a workspace and a home space, I think is important, and that's definitely something I wish I distinguish more as a consultant as well, rather than having your home office also be the place where you hang out and watch TV and play games. Have a dedicated workspace where you sit down and open your computer here, and this is where I do my work. I don't eat here. I don't watch YouTube here. I don't play games here. Versus over here is where I have fun. Or this is the dinner table I eat meals with my family, or this is the computer that I play games on. That kind of thing. So having that strong, even if it's just a mental boundary of a workspace and a play space. Yeah.
That's awesome advice. Moon, any further thoughts you want to share with this consulting audience?
There's a new skill that I'm working on that I don't think necessarily I had practiced on as a consultant, and that is long-term relationship building with your team. That's very that's been a kind of a difficult thing for me because I think sometimes as a consultant we um, go into a project or a situation with a countdown clock versus as a dentist sometimes you're at the same place for 35 years. You have to be really diligent about building really really strong relationship with not just your patients but the the team in your office, and it's the dynamic is also very very different. Whereas before I was the consultant guy and I didn't really feel like I had a big power dynamic issue with other consultants or clients that I worked with, versus as a dentist, everyone in the office is calling you doctor, and how you behave in front of your team is going to affect how they behave in front of you and in front of patients. And so much of the time, the stronger relationship with the patient is built by the hygienist and the assistant. So if you can't be always professional, but caring and kind, that line has been really, really difficult to navigate. Because as a consultant, I felt more like an individual, versus as a dentist, I feel more like the representation of the entire practice. that has been a, a difficult thing, and I feel like that would be still a really good skill for a consultant to develop as well, because sometimes, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, even if it's a short project, sometimes that connection can really come through for you many years down the line.
Oh,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah, and that was definitely certain a skill I was lacking as a consultant, but I think it would have been really important for me to learn and have.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a quote out there that I don't love. It's been going around recently that says, "The bridges you burn will light the way." And I
Yeah.
completely disagree. I couldn't disagree more. In
Yeah.
fact, the bridges you build will continue to serve you well throughout your career. And, when you're first coming out of school, you don't yet know the importance of that to the same extent. You think, oh, I've interacted with this person here, and then I move on and do something else. Well, most industries are actually pretty small. Most communities are actually pretty small. I've had the opportunity to live in a lot of different places and certainly travel a ton. And I can't tell you, there's so few degrees of separation in who knows whom and in how they interact, whether it be personally, professionally, and making sure that the reputation that you're building and that the relationships that you're cultivating are positive and based in consideration of the other humans that you're interacting with is really paramount.
Yeah.
So
That,
thank you for bringing that up.
yeah, I think that's probably the best word to describe the skills that I learned as a consultant that's serving me well as a dentist. Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
Moon, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fun. It was nice to see your face too.
Yeah.
It's too
Nice.
long. It's been too long.
It really has been.
Well, thank you so much for joining this episode of the Consultants Counsel, and really appreciate your insights, and I hope that they help others.
Thank you again for having me. This was very fun.